The Cabin at Black Hollow. I don't know why I'm writing this. Maybe I just need someone to know what happened. Maybe I just want to believe I didn't imagine it all. It started when I rented the cabin at Black Hollow for a weekend getaway. The place was cheap, too cheap, but I chalked it up to the fact that it was deep in the woods, miles from any town. The listing had warned there was no cell service, no internet, just solitude. That's exactly what I wanted. The drive was long, the road narrowing into a single dirt path that twisted through dense forest. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, bleeding red and orange through the trees. The cabin was smaller than I expected, just a single-story structure with dark wood siding and a slanted roof. It smelled damp inside, like old wood and something else, something rotten. I convinced myself it was my imagination. It was an old place, after all. I set my bags down, lit the fireplace, and settled in for the night. That's when the knocking started. It was faint at first, like a branch tapping against the wall, but then it came again. 3 slow, deliberate knocks from the back door. I froze. No one knew I was here. I grabbed my flashlight and crept to the door, pressing my ear against the wood. Silence. My heartbeat pounded in my ears. Slowly, I unlocked it and swung it open. Nothing. Just the thick wood swallowing the last of the daylight. I told myself it was the wind, the trees shifting. Something rational. I locked the door and went to bed. At 3:12 a.m., I woke up gasping, my body ice cold. I didn't know why at first. Then I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. The knocking was back, but this time it was coming from inside the cabin. I didn't move. I couldn't. My breath came in shallow gasps. The sound was coming from the closet across the room, slow and rhythmic. Something was in there. I reached for my phone before remembering. No service. No one to call. No one to help me. I forced myself to move, inching toward the closet. The wood was old, warped. The door shuddered with each knock. I reached out with a shaking hand, grabbed the handle and yanked it open. Nothing. The closet was empty, just darkness yawning back at me. Then I saw them. Handprints. Faint, smeared, as if someone had pressed their palms against the inside of the door, dragging their fingers down. They weren't mine. I didn't sleep after that. I sat by the fireplace, my back to the wall, watching the shadows crawl across the floor. The knocking didn't come again, but the silence was worse. It felt like the whole cabin was holding its breath. As soon as the sun rose, I grabbed my bags and ran. I didn't even lock the door behind me. I just drove, tearing down that narrow dirt road until I saw civilization again. When I got home, I checked the listing to warn others. But it was gone. No record of the cabin, no rental history, nothing. I don't know what was in there with me, but I know this. Something knocked, and it wanted me to answer. Whispers in the Hollow. I should have never come to the cabin. I see that now. It was supposed to be a weekend of solitude, a chance to clear my head. A friend of a friend had offered me their family's old place deep in the woods, a cabin built before the town even existed. No phone service, no neighbors, just quiet. It sounded perfect. The drive was long, the road narrowing into a dirt trail swallowed by towering pines. By the time I arrived, the sun was setting, drenching the world in bloody reds and bruised purples. The cabin stood alone, its wood darkened with age, its windows like empty eyes staring out at nothing. Inside, the air was thick with dust and something else, something I couldn't place. It wasn't rot, not exactly, but it carried the weight of things left alone too long. The furniture was sparse, a battered couch, a wooden table, a stone fireplace that looked like it hadn't been used in decades. I unpacked quickly, wanting to settle in before night fully claimed the woods. As I set my bag on the bed, I heard it. A whisper. I froze, listening. It had been faint, almost too soft to notice, like wind through leaves. But the air inside was still. I told myself it was nothing, just my imagination. Then, at exactly 2:17 a.m., I woke up. At first, I wasn't sure why. The cabin was silent, the kind of deep silence that makes your ears ring. I shifted in bed, reaching for my flashlight when I heard it again. Whispering. A breathy murmur just beyond the walls. Not one voice, but many, overlapping, too low to make out the words. I sat up, my pulse hammering. The sound wasn't coming from outside. It was inside the cabin. I forced myself to turn on the flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. The room was empty. The door was still locked. Nothing had changed, and yet I could still hear them, just on the edge of sound, like voices bleeding through a bad radio signal. I didn't sleep after that. I sat up in bed, my back pressed to the wall, waiting for morning. At dawn, the whispers stopped. I convinced myself I had been dreaming. Exhaustion can do that, right? I forced myself to eat, to explore outside, to shake off the unease coiling in my stomach. That's when I saw them. Footprints, leading from the trees to the cabin. Bare, human. Footprints. They weren't there yesterday. I followed them, my breath coming in short bursts. They led straight to the front door. But here's what made my blood turn to ice. There were no footprints leading away. I was done. I packed my bag in record time, grabbing my keys with shaking hands. I reached for the doorknob, and the whispering returned. Louder this time, urgent, right behind me. I didn't look. I didn't breathe. I yanked the door open and ran, stumbling to my car, my gut screaming that if I turned around, I would see something I wasn't meant to. The engine roared to life and I tore down that dirt road, my hands white-knuckled on the wheel. I didn't stop driving until I saw power lines again, until I knew I was safe. I never told my friend why I left early. I never went back. But sometimes, late at night, I wake up to silence so thick it hums in my ears. And I swear, just for a second, I hear them, the whispers, calling me back. The cabin. I shouldn't have come here alone. It was supposed to be a peaceful weekend, just me, the trees, and the quiet. No emails, no phone calls, no people. A friend had recommended the cabin, said it was perfect for solitude. I should have asked why he never used it himself. The place was deep in the woods, miles from any town. The road leading up to it was barely a road at all, just a narrow, winding dirt path that my car barely managed. By the time I arrived, the sun was sinking low, casting long shadows through the trees. The cabin was small, old, the wood dark with age. There was a porch with a single rocking chair, and the windows were covered in dust. Inside, it smelled like damp wood and neglect. There was no electricity, just a fireplace and an old oil lamp. I lit it and set my bag down. The silence pressed in, thick and heavy. That's when I noticed the door. At the end of the narrow hallway, past the tiny kitchen, was a door that didn't match the others. It was older, darker, with a handle that looked rusted shut. Something about it made my skin crawl. I tried to ignore it. That night, I woke to a sound, a slow, rhythmic creaking. Lying in the dark, my heart hammering, I listened. The sound was coming from the porch, the rocking chair. Someone, or something, was sitting in it. I forced myself to move, inching toward the window. My breath fogged the glass as I peered outside. The chair was empty, but it was still rocking. I told myself it was the wind. I crawled back into bed, my ears straining for any sound. That's when I heard the whispering. Software. Faint, coming from inside the cabin. I sat up, every hair on my body standing on end. The whispers weren't words, just the sound of breath and movement. Coming from the hallway, coming from behind that door. I don't remember getting out of bed. I don't remember grabbing my keys. But the next thing I knew, I was in my car, speeding down that dirt road, branches scraping against the sides as I tore through the trees. I didn't stop driving until I saw street lights again. The next day, I called my friend. "Hey," I said, forcing a laugh. "Weird question, but has anyone else mentioned strange things happening at the cabin?" Silence. Then a sigh. "You heard them, didn't you?" he said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. He exhaled slowly. "You did the right thing. You left." I waited for him to say more, but he didn't. And I didn't ask. I'll never go back to that cabin. But sometimes, late at night, when the world is quiet, I swear I can still hear the rocking chair